Greetings all, and welcome to Lucas Brews. In today's inbox review, we'll be having a close look at a 1/72nd scale Mitsubishi Zero from Tamiya, specifically the A6M3 Model 32, known as the Hamp, which is notable for having clipped wings and being the main aircraft used by the Tainan Kokutai during August of 1942. So this is one of several Zeros I've picked up for my Battle of Milne Bay film, and it's probably one of the more expensive ones. So let's have a close look at it and see if it's worth the price. So the box itself comes with a nice plastic wrap, which is very comforting as it means obviously the kit's not been opened once it's left the factory, but obviously it's a bit glossy, so I'm going to remove that so we can see things more easily. The box art features some very nice artwork of a Zero flying along by itself through the clouds, and it looks like it's one from the Tainan Kokutai with V190 on the tail there. And then we've got the typical Tamiya titles at the top here, the scale in the corner, and some of the details highlighted, including that 3 markings are included. We've got the specifications for the aircraft, and a little thing saying it's part of their 1/72nd scale Warbird collection, with a product number of 84. The bottom of the box features another little badge for the Warbirds collection, along with one of these schemes included, which is from the 2nd Air Group in New Guinea at Buna in August of 1942. Interestingly, that's the same base where most of the attacks against Milne Bay were based from, and that's the same time period, so it may be that I can actually use this scheme as well as the one featured on the box, which is handy. We've got some notes about colours. Annoyingly to me, I only seem to use the AS colours, which are like the spray can range for the exterior colours. It would be nice if they included some for their XF, like enamel and acrylic lacquer range, but oh well. We've got some other writing here, but unfortunately I don't understand Japanese, but I'm imagining it's some details about the kit. The sides of the box feature repeats of the box art, and then on the top we have our third scheme here, which is from the Oita Naval Air Group in 1944, and it's in a very nice dark green camouflage to hide it in the jungle islands with the grey underside, so it looks pretty cool. A few more little details in the corner and barcodes, along with the contact for Tamiya in Europe. And otherwise, that's pretty much it for the box, as there's nothing on the underside, so we'll open it up and have a look at what's inside. So for such a small aircraft, we have quite a large box here, with the sprues taking up a reasonable amount of space inside of it. We've got a sort of main set of sprues in one bag here, and then a smaller set along with the clear parts and some polycaps. Another bag here containing our decals. We've got some background information as well as instructions in 2 separate booklets, which is very nice. And we've also got a nice little handy sheet here with some advice if you're new to model making, sort of telling you about some of the tools and different ways to go about cleaning the model up and assembling it. So very nice that that's included, and very good if you're a beginner. The background information sheet has some very nice illustrations as well as some descriptions in various languages, luckily for me including English, which details a lot about the history of the Zero as well as its combat performance, specifications, and it even goes into quite a bit of detail about the variants and its development. And it talks specifically about the Hamp as well, obviously, being the A6M3 Model 32. And it talks a bit about how the wings were basically clipped to try and increase speed and as well as improve dive performance. And they also fitted a new Sake 21 engine, although unfortunately the reduction in range and agility from making the wings shorter meant it wasn't considered as good. So it was pretty short-lived, and very quickly they developed the Model 22 with the wings back extended and some extra fuel tanks put back in. So I think it's fantastic that Tamiya have gone to the extra effort and included this to give you a bit more information and context to the aircraft, and yeah, it's a very great basis if you want to learn more. The instructions themselves feature again several different languages. On the front of them we've got a nice repeat of the box art in black and white, various sort of things to read before assembly, including warnings and advice on using tools. We've got our paint guide here, which uses Tamiya colours. Again, I find it a bit annoying they only use the AS spray can colours for exterior colours, when they do sometimes have equivalents in their sort of regular range, but oh well, at least it's reasonably easy to convert most of them. Opening up, we've got a fold-out format, which I'm not a huge fan of, but fortunately you could just fold them over the corners here without too much trouble and make the instructions take up less space on your workbench. On the first inside page, we've got more advice on how to go about removing parts from the sprue, gluing them all together and that sort of thing, as well as advice on painting. There's no sprue map, but they do have the different aircraft listed as A, B, C, depending on which scheme you're going with, and they mention that some of these parts you're not going to use. Typical for most kits, assembly starts with the cockpit, We've got a separate part here for the instrument panel with what look like decals, as well as a color guide sort of indicating to paint the dials a sort of blackish color, but the cockpit interior color for the main panel. We've then got a assembly with the front bulkhead here, which you add the main instrument panel and these little machine guns to. For the pilot seat, we've got a little tray here, and then the rear bulkhead, which it gets attached to. And then we've got a separate control here for, I think, possibly the flaps or maybe some sort of pump system. Next, we've got the cockpit floor, which is a single piece, which what looks like a lot of details on it. And then we're adding, of course, the control column here with a bit of control linkage molded to it. And then once that's done, you can add this sort of side panel here with some more instrument details and controls, followed by the seat and front bulkhead there to finish assembling the cockpit. So they have done a bit of shading to indicate different colors on these parts, although it's not as clear as if it was in color, it's still pretty good. For the engine, there's a polycap which gets installed in between the two cylinder halves there, which look like they have quite a nice bit of detail. And obviously that will allow you to stick the propeller in and hold it pretty tight so you can rotate it without it falling off. Then we've got our front gearbox part here, which goes over the top of the front row. And once that's been assembled, you can then add it to the rear bulkhead here, which also has the cowl flaps molded into it, and the front cowling here, which I think is specific for the A6M3. The interior sidewalls also have a fair bit of assembly here with some more controls and gauges, as well as a separate part here for our throttle quadrant, which looks fantastically detailed. And on top of that, there's even sidewall details there for probably radios and other equipment, so that's really fantastic and looks quite detailed. On the other side, we've got some sort of wiring or ducting system, as well as more separate controls there to add. And it looks like we've also got to cut off a little hole here if we want to add the radio or direction finder in the rear there. Moving over the page, once we've done all that, we can then join the fuselage halves together. Interestingly, there's more things to cut out. I'm not too sure what this part is, but this might be another piece of radio equipment. We then have a separate little fillet piece here, which goes at the base of the tail, which is interesting that it's not molded already to the tail. Then for step 6, we're adding the front cowling piece here, which also contains our gun sight and the machine gun barrels. And once that's in place, you can then add the cockpit assembly by putting it up into the fuselage, which is nice that you can do that later. For step 7, we've then got our wings here, which have a little bit of painting required on the inside for the wheel wells. And it looks like you've got to drill out some holes for the cannons and probably a pitot tube or some other piece of equipment. It doesn't really say, and it is a little bit hard to see what you're cutting out, but oh well, hopefully it'll all make sense later on. For step 8, we then join the wing halves together, and it looks like there's some smaller parts here to paint, but otherwise pretty simple. Then for step 9, we can add those wings to the underside of the fuselage, along with the horizontal stabilizers and the rudder. Then we've got a other little piece here. For step 10, we've then got what looks like our radiator and exhaust assembly there. So that gets installed into that piece, and you can paint the exhaust, which are molded to it. And then we've got our landing gear assembly. So this looks like if the undercarriage is in the extended position. We've basically got a piece here with the inner part of the landing gear flap with part of the wheel well molded to it. So it should be a nice solid piece, along with a separate part here for the actuator, and then another smaller part for the outer part. For step 11, we then assemble the main landing gear part with the wheel, the main strut, and the landing gear cover for both sides. And as you can see, there's a bit of painting to do before assembling these parts. And once that's done, they can then be added to the underside of the wings. We've then got the engine getting added, along with the exhausts and that sort of air intake at the underside of the fuselage there, and it mentions specifically to attach the exhaust piece first. Along with that, we've also got these underside panels for each side of the wings, and the tail wheel and either a tail hook or for versions A and B a fairing over the top, since the aircraft are obviously not being used on carriers. For step 13, we then have a clear part here for the gun sight. I originally thought that was just a single piece attached to the cowling there, but no, we've got a separate clear part for the actual sight system, so that gets painted up and installed. And then we've got a mast included for version C only, and the canopy, which has options to be installed either in a closed position or with two separate parts here for the opened option. There's a separate front windshield that goes in front, but obviously that's the same for either option here. And the last few steps for assembly include the propeller, which has a base piece with a long sort of stick which gets installed in and would fit with the polycap. And we've got a single piece for the propeller blades and then a separate piece at the front for the spinner, which gets painted different colors depending on which aircraft you're doing. Then we've got a drop tank, and last but not least, we've got these little finer details such as these, I think, control balances or hinges for the ailerons and the pitot tube on the left wing. And at the very back we have our marking guide, which is sort of split to side profiles and then upper surface for both A and B, and then a separate one here for Scheme C since it's done in the green. So I'm not a huge fan of how that's sort of laid out, but it's still not terrible. You can pretty easily see where all of the stencils go, and they've included sort of diagrams of some of the finer ones so you can see which ones they are. And it's nice that we've got 3 markings included for the Model 32, considering it wasn't used as extensively as other variants. And we've got the later sort of camouflage model as well as the early one, which is cool. The back here then just has some advice on painting as well as applying decals and some other advertisements and addresses for aftermarket service. And one thing I like about the painting guide is it talks a bit about the transition that aircraft went through. So it talks about the grey tinted grey being used early on, but some of the aircraft used in the Solomons had green sort of hastily painted over, but that then became standard factory in July 1943. So it's cool that it talks a bit about the history of painting Japanese aircraft. So moving on to the plastic parts, I'll open up this larger set of sprues here first. On this main sprue, we've got our underside of the wings here, which features some very nice fine recessed detail. Quite crisply done, which is great. And they've even done as much detail as all these little bulges for the cannons, as well as raised panels in some areas where there's a bit more structure. So yeah, they've done a really fantastic job there capturing the surface detail with even little rivet details as well. Our ejection ports here are not fully see-through, but they're quite nice and deep, which looks great. And you can see some of the ribbing for the inside of the landing gear bay is actually molded to the wings there, which is cool. And it's obviously going to be quite nice and deep, so going to look very excellent, I reckon. For the upper surface of the wings, the detail's pretty similar as well. Really nice recessed details with a couple of raised reinforced panels and details as well, which look fantastic. There's a few texture differences in the plastic, but I don't think that's any imperfection. It's sort of just a slight change in colour, so that's fine. The underside of the wings have quite a lot of little details for the inside of the wheel wells there, with what looks like some sort of wiring and surface detail as well for ribbing. So yeah, that looks fantastic. The control surfaces are done with some raised bumps for the fabric, so no sort of divots or anything, but they still look really quite nice. So yeah, all that fine surface detail is definitely going to benefit from being careful with finish and either very, very carefully applying paint by brush or better yet using an airbrush. We've got these little panels here which go on the underside of the wings there with a little bit of recessed detail, but nothing too much. Our fuselage halves there look really great as well. Again, they've done a really nice job doing not only recessed panel lines, access hatches and details, but also raised ones for like structural areas and fairings, so that looks fantastic. I like that the vents here for the engine are nice and deep there, which looks really good, and you can see all these little fine details. Yeah, they just look fantastic. The inside of the cockpit here has some of our details, so we have what looks like some sort of trim tab or wheel with a little control handle on it, and some really nicely done raised ribbing details with little recessed perforations on some of them, and a few little details with raised switches there, so that looks really great. Of course, a lot more detail is going to come from the separate parts, but already you can see that's some very fantastic crisp detailing. The cow flaps there with the bulkhead look pretty cleanly molded as well, and our instrument panel features a mix of raised sort of circles for individual dials with some recessed details where appropriate. Probably better to use the decal since there's no sort of raised dial hands or details to dry brush, so to get better detail you're probably going to want to use those. But they have done some of the individual controls there which are really fine and very crisply done. A few other smaller parts here include our exhausts with the intake there for the, I think, oil radiator, which looks fantastic, and the exhausts are even drilled out and look really nice and deep. We've got the part of the cowling here with the machine gun barrel sticking out and the framework to hold the gun sight, which looks great. A little rudder here with some raised details for the fabric sort of ribbing. And we've got our antenna here for the rear of the fuselage, and that little flap sort of piece that goes on the underside, I think, between the wings just here. Within that bag, there was also a smaller bag which contains our engine cowling, which would be, I think, quite specific to the A6M3, with the extra intake on the top as opposed to the early versions, and the slightly different machine gun sort of barrel exits. And this part's looking really fantastic with some recessed hinges and access hatches there. quite nice and shallow, so not overly done, but still very crisp. There is a little bit of flash on the edge of the cowling there, but nothing too major. As for the second bag here, we've got a lot more of the finer parts and details, as well as separate bags with the clear parts and the polycaps. So in this corner here, we've got the landing gear struts, which are really finely detailed, but also very crisp, which is fantastic to see with all the details on the piston or the shock absorber there, which looks great, and all the little hinges and joints. We've got the little actuators for the landing gear doors that are inside, which are just here as well, and they look pretty good. They've even got little keys to help line them up and pegging, and there's almost no ejector pin marks at all, which is amazing. We've got our little tail hook there, which is very, very fine and crisply done there with the little notch at the back. Sadly, I won't be using it if I'm doing one for Milne Bay, because obviously the Tainan Kokutai were land-based, so I'll be using this part here. But yeah, it's also quite nicely done. We've got those tiny little flaps for the outer part of the landing gear bay, which even have a little bit of detail on the inside there, which is amazing. We've got various other small parts here. These look like our throttle controls there, and some more little tiny levers and gauges, which are absolutely fantastic that they've managed to replicate that with molding. We've got what looks like some sort of actuator or antenna perhaps. Our tail wheel there. The control column there with some of the control hinges and joints there, which look fantastic. This looks like our pitot tube, which is very, very finely molded and incredibly doesn't have any flash on it at all. We've got the sidewall details, which have some various gauges and I think fuel selectors and other engine controls, which look really nicely done. A nice mix of raised and recessed details there, so that's going to be a lot of fun to paint. Our seats there with some of the holes here recessed but not fully drilled out for the pilot. These appear to be more details for the cockpit, so I think this is some of the wiring and possibly a light or some sort of vent. We've got possibly a radio or some other controls with some very fine raised and recessed details on it. The back of the seat has a bit of a ejector pin mark, but you're not probably going to see that anyways. There's some nice raised details on the wheel hubs there with some slight separation from the tyres. A little bit of a seam mark perhaps, or possibly just part of the tyre tread there. It's a bit hard to tell. More parts of the landing gear bay doors with some nice raised and recessed details on the outer part, and yeah, a few keying parts to help line things up on the inside there. Then we've got our horizontal stabilizers, which like the rest of the aircraft are quite nicely done with recessed panel lines and some raised details for the fabric. Our drop tanks look pretty good as well with recessed details where appropriate, and then I think there's sort of a raised line on the outside here. Our cockpit floor is very crisply done with some nice raised details for the rudder pedals and some other sort of framework. More cockpit equipment pieces and another type of instrument panel with again very nice raised details. I think this is part of the framework that the seat attaches to. And then just to the right we've got our front bulkhead, which the instrument panel will attach to, and I think that's sort of our machine gun ammunition storage or some other bulkhead of some kind. Our rear bulkhead here with the holes actually fully drilled out, which is fantastic, and a little bit of framework and keying to help line up the pilot seat. And just above them we've got our machine guns. Our engine details are also very crisp and finely done with the cylinder heads very nicely done with recessed details and then some raised wiring and supports. Our gearbox also has a bit of a ring around it with some raised details, which looks fantastic. This appears to be the radiator that's on the underside of the wings, and they've actually done recessed holes on it. They're very, very fine, but they are there. These look like barrels probably for cannons, which look pretty good. And finally, in this right corner, we've got our propeller assemblies, which are very cleanly done without any flash really, maybe a tiny bit on some parts, but yeah, really cleanly done. And finally we've got some more antennas and equipment and the little control hinges for the ailerons there. So yeah, some incredibly detailed and crisp molding here with a lot of fine parts. The polycaps are, well, they're polycaps, so nothing too special to report here, but I do quite like using them rather than the sometimes very fiddly assemblies other manufacturers come up with for allowing your propellers to rotate. And the other advantage I like about polycaps is you can obviously pull the propeller off at any time for travel, storage, that sort of thing, which is great, and then still stick it on and it will rotate. So yeah, big fan of polycaps. And lastly, in terms of plastic parts, we've got our clear ones. So I'll open these ones up. So yeah, really great that they're included in a separate bag to protect them from getting scratched when the other parts are knocking around. And yeah, the clear quality on these is absolutely fantastic without any sort of scratches or blemishes by the looks of things. Except maybe one tiny one in this corner window here. They are very curved canopies, so there is a little bit of distortion, as you can see, sort of looking through it with my finger there. But in general, they're pretty good, and yeah, they've done a really nice job with some very crisp raised framework for the canopy. I'm probably going to try and vacuform these, I reckon, just to try and get a little bit more clarity because of the curves on them. But out of the box, these are still really fantastic. And of course, we've got our gun sight there, which is microscopic and going to be a lot of fun to try and paint up. And lastly in this kit we have the decals, and I personally have a few problems usually with Tamiya ones. Although the quality and the colour on them is absolutely fantastic in terms of sort of the print details, and like you can read the serials and everything is absolutely beautiful, and we've even got seatbelt decals and instrument dials that are separate, so yeah, a lot of nice features there. I find that they tend to be very thick and silver quite badly, even with a gloss coat. So yeah, I might need to just look at how I'm doing them and maybe try using some stronger decal solutions, but in general I really struggle with Tamiya decals and don't like them. But I'm obviously going to definitely use V190 since it's one of the Tainan Kokutai Zeros, and possibly the Scheme B, which is Q-102, since it was also based at Boona during August, meaning it might have been involved in Milne Bay, but I'll have to do a bit of research about it and the second air group. I do like that they've done the walkway stencils separately, so there's a lot less clear film that can fog up. And maybe if I get some other setting agents rather than the Tamiya decal adhesive and the Vallejo softener I've been using, I'll get desirable results out of these. So that wraps up our look at the fantastic Tamiya Mitsubishi A6M3 and as you can see, absolutely fantastic kit in terms of the quality of the plastic moulding and some incredibly fine details, which is amazing to see. Apart from having my own personal issues with the decals, which no one else seems to complain about too much, I think it's a really fantastic looking kit. The only downside seems to be that they are more expensive than other contemporary model kits, but definitely a lot more detailed. And I managed to pick this one up while it was on sale anyways, so they typically go for around about 30 AUD, but I got mine from Frontline Hobbies for around about 25. Of course, they cover the earlier A6M2 as well as the A6M5. I think the prices for those are pretty similar, and the level of detail is probably about the same since they're pretty much the exact same tooling with just a few different parts. So if you want a detailed Zero, this one's absolutely fantastic, and obviously you could go even further with aftermarket parts if you so wished, and I'm very much looking forward to putting one of these together for my Battle of Milne Bay film. Thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed it and got something out of it. If you did, please be sure to leave a like and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss any future build videos, inbox reviews, or animation updates. A massive thank you to my wonderful patrons for helping me to fund my channel by buying kits as well as products I use to make them and the time I spend making these videos. Previously, I've done an inbox review of the Airfix A6M3, so if you want to check that one out, I'll leave a link in the description. And pretty soon I'll also be having a look at both the recent Hasegawa and the older Hasegawa tooling of several Zero kits, which again I'll be doing as part of my Milne Bay film, which I'm currently working on. That's it for this one, but until the next video, as always, take care and model on.